The only Mike Myers I was allowed to watch was Shrek.
Donkey!
Yeah, that's it.
Donkey!
I remember watching that, and he calls him an ass. And I remember being, as a young person, being like, oh my god, this is an animated movie. What are they doing?
Dude,
Keep off that grass on your shoes. Wipe your face.
That was a good one. That was a good one. Is that a DreamWorks movie?
Yeah.
All right.
Well, you should go watch So I Married an Axe Murderer. Then that's a good Mike Myers,
right.
old Mike Myers classic.
Oh, I don't watch old things.
You don't watch, but what's the cutoff for you?
Just anything older than me.
No, nice.
You're listening to The Janchi Show, hosted by 3 Korean-American adoptees diving headfirst into what it means to be adopted, Korean, American, and more. And now, here's your hosts, Nathan, Patrick, and KJ.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back to The Janchi Show. It's your boys, KJ, Nathan, Patrick.
So fast.
We are here. How are you doing, fellas? I was like, this is how we start. And then I was like, wait, now what? But how are you doing?
Cordial hellos.
I'm doing good. There's no snow on the ground, so that
Should
feels
there
good.
be?
There was 2 days ago.
Oh, wow. That's
and
gross.
it's going to be 80 degrees tomorrow or the next day.
Yeah, it was 30 when I took my kid to school, and it was 66 when we left. Just a little while ago.
It's just got into the 40s before we hopped on here.
I know I lived in the Midwest for a long time, but now that I'm back in Texas, I forget that it's cold still in other places.
Well, it shouldn't be. I mean, even here, it should not be, but for some reason it is. Well, we all know the reasons, but
yeah,
global
thanks,
warming,
Obama.
cooling.
Sorry, wait. I don't know.
I think that's more of an Al Gore. Thanks, Al Gore.
Oh, thanks.
Thanks for letting us
Clinton.
know what's happening.
Yeah, thanks for alerting
Thanks for letting us know the truth. Jeez.
That we have created ourselves.
I don't know how to politic.
Anyway, this is a Janchi Show.
Yes. Janchi means to feast or to celebrate, which is what we're here to do, to talk about our intersectional identities and to celebrate who we are and also feast on a snack or drink. Can you feast on drinks? I always wonder that, but I'm going to say
well, yes, because that one can had rice in it, so you're kind of chewing.
Ew, gross.
That's true.
That's so gross. I feel like we've almost exclusively had chunky liquids to drink, which is that's a rough time. I don't know what it is about Koreans and chunky liquids, but not a big fan personally.
There's probably something to it that we just don't know yet. Some
Dude,
layer.
Speaking about chunky liquids, this is not a great perfect segue, but I for Easter had one of those like small kind of airplane level bottles of wine thing. It was like a whatever Merlot, and I
single
poured it
serving.
out. Yeah. So I poured it out, drank it, and then at the bottom there were like grounds in it, and I was like, wine doesn't have grounds. What is this? My sister-in-law told me it was sugar. Yeah, and I was just like, this is disgusting, but I didn't know that existed in the bottom of those things, or even in wine bottles necessarily. Shows you how cultured I am. But anyways, it was really gross.
Good wine.
No, old wine actually. So it's just sediment, and a lot of times you see people put wine in a decanter, and then the decanter, the stuff stays at the bottom while you pour everything else out.
Yeah, it was real gross. So
it's okay.
Anyways,
it won't kill you.
It was a great glass until I got to the end, and I was like, oh nope.
That's how I feel about ginger beer sometimes. Like when I'm drinking ginger beer, some ginger beers actually have like sediment at the bottom of those too. And I always get a little weirded out when I get to the bottom because it's like, as Patrick would say, murky. And
I haven't said that in a long time.
That's language you gave us.
I think I got scolded
always
for saying
attributed
that,
to you.
so I have not brought it back up.
I'm never defining a lake or pond as murky again. Only my drinks. Thank you, Patrick.
Well,
my drinks.
All right. You're welcome for that.
Solid. Well, hey, we've got a really great interview today with our guest, Mindy Tsonas Choi. What was something that you took away that you remember that you're excited about to hear back in this tape?
She just had a lot of really good information. That's my take. I don't want to spoil it, so I'm just giving everyone
not even a tease of what the information was.
No.
It was just good information.
I met her first on Instagram, and so that's where I learned about her advocacy and very important content. So there's my teaser.
Nice. Yeah, I totally forgot that part of your story. And I was like, oh, this is the person who did the stuff to make the stuff happen where you did the things. And yeah,
during the interview, I saw that light bulb go on right as we were doing the thing. I saw it pop up right above your head. It was really perfect timing.
Sometimes you got to flip the switch on.
You know, sometimes I spend so much time connecting things that other things get disconnected, and then it got reconnected. So yeah, no, I thought
that makes sense.
I think Mindy talks good. She's a
very
good talker, and I just found her story to be so compelling. It was just really engaging, and we didn't even talk about all the things we wanted to talk about.
Yeah.
So
I think that's the thing that I remember the most is like I feel like we got to the end of our time very quickly, and I was just. And you'll hear me talk about it a bunch at the end of the interview. I took away, and of course I edited this episode. Just the language, like you said, she's very, very well spoken, very articulate, and she brought new language to the conversation that I've been having. And I felt like a lot of her story I resonated with, and I thought there were a lot of parallels to my own story. So. Yeah, I thought it was an excellent conversation
and
a great addition. Yeah, one that we will definitely continue, and definitely a great addition to our library of incredible guests who have come on.
Absolutely. So
absolutely.
Without further ado, here is that tape.
Roll it.
Hooray! Hey. Okay, welcome back to the Janchi Show. This is our interview with the one and only Mindy Tsonas Choi. Hooray! I added that in because I felt like it should be, it's like sometimes they'll be like, oh, we're so excited to have you, but it's just like three of us screaming into a vacuum and there's not like, whatever. Anyways, welcome to the show. How are you?
I'm good. I'm super happy to be here with you guys. Thanks so much for having me.
We are very excited to have you on the show. I was just informed that my waveform is, quote, huge. So hopefully everything is going to be fine in the recording, but I can't
I got to edit this
fix
too.
it now. Yeah, you do.
You were coming in so hot.
Yep, you're welcome. Anyways, Mindy, just a little sneak peek behind the curtain. It's been a while, I feel like, since we have done a show. I don't know. It's probably just not even been that long, but I'm just transitioning into show mode. Let's kick this off like we do all of our guest shows, Mindy. And would you tell us your adoption story in as much or as little detail as you want? The floor and the story is yours.
Wow. Okay. Well, I feel like now, like my adoption story is pretty much my whole life. Like I feel like I'm living it still. I'm still trying to figure it all out. But as far as like going back to the beginning, as far as I know, I was born in Daegu, South Korea. And that's where I was relinquished. And in my file and what my adoptive parents had been told at the time was that I was left at the gate of an orphanage in Daegu and was taken in and stayed there for a bit. And I was adopted from there. And then the orphanage had burned down.
Whoa.
And I was about 10 months old when I came to the States. I met my parents actually at JFK Airport in New York City. They drove out from Boston, which was where they were living in the Boston suburban area and where I grew up. And that's sort of the very beginning. And I think like as far as a childhood, very typically for transracial adoptees, living in communities that are primarily white, a family that's entirely white and neighborhoods, everything that just look nothing like you. But as far as like family life and school and things like that, things were pretty idyllic. I mean, it was like a Boston suburb that we were, a middle upper class family. I had access to, lots of fun things as kids, and a really great little town that had a great center and, friends, and I did pretty well in school. But that's like on one side. And I feel like this is like the truth of so much of my adoption story that I'm still living, is that there's always a duality. And what you see on the outside is really not what's going on the inside ever. And I feel like from the very beginning, that was my experience. But of course, as a child, I had no language for that. Like, I had no idea what I was experiencing, like this disparity of like, oh my God, you have this really great life and these great adoptive parents. And I have a brother who's younger, who is their biological son. And we had a good relationship, still do. And just like always feeling like really unsettled and not understanding why. And of course, just like, I think because of the culture we live in, we just attribute it to ourselves. Like, there's something wrong with me. Like, I'm broken, or I can't adapt, or just, and I think it's also, what I found growing up and like seeking support as an adoptee, especially as like someone who was kind of on the cusp of the first wave adoptions, where I didn't grow up in the age of the internet, and so had no resources. Yay, right? It's
not ageist on the
show. Internet encyclopedia.
But it's a real disparity, I think, in comparison to adoptees who, came over like in the 80s. But, for us, I was born in 72 and I was adopted that same year. Like, the only experience I had with other adoptees was if, my parents took me to an adoptee event or a cultural camp or something, which we didn't have a lot of that out here in the Boston area, at least not that I was aware of and not that I really experienced. I did have friends with this one family who they had I think 6 adoptee siblings. It was a huge adoptee family very, very early on. And then I think either they moved away or our parents just lost touch and we didn't see each other, but really no experience at all with any adoptees until much, much, much later in life. So I really lived this dual existence of seemingly everything was great. I was a good student. I did athletics. I was a cheerleader. I had friends. I went to parties. I did all the normal things that I thought I was supposed to do. But was always feeling like something was missing. And when I went away to college, I completely fell apart. And I think it was really I finally had the space to really fall apart. There was not that pressure to conform and be this person who I thought I was supposed to be. But then also, there weren't any structures or social systems in place to keep things, the way they were going. It was such a big transition and change in my life. And it was the first time in my life without my family. So, and it was really a time when I was really sort of confronted with, I think a depression that was simmering for a long time that I just couldn't name. I didn't know it was depression. It didn't look like depression. But what it looked like was even though I had a lot of friends and had a regular, quote unquote, normal social life, inside, I was just really not feeling like I fit in or that things were well. It's such a hard thing to describe. And I'm sure you and maybe other folks listening might be able to really relate to that.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, first off, thank you for sharing this portion of your story so far. It was really, I was enraptured, I will say. I really enjoyed listening to you speak about it because I resonated with a lot, especially you're talking about growing up in an upper middle class family, in an idyllic situation, really. When people think about the good adoption narrative, they could look at my story and say, here's an example. But I also resonated with, I didn't have the language to articulate what I was feeling while I was growing up in that situation. And you talked about when you got to college, you said college was a space for you to fall apart. It was a space for you to confront that depression or feel that for the very first time. And I love that. I've never heard it spoken that way before, that kind of metaphor used, and it really resonated with me because I felt the exact same way. And when I got to college, it really was like everything that I knew was crumbling apart. And what I did was to piece it back together, I felt like I had to fall apart even more than that. Because to address it, I tried to go back to my comfort zone, moved closer to home, transferred schools, did that sort of thing. So I was wondering, as you were reaching that point, and I think this might have been where we were going in the next part of your story, was kind of how did you start to put those pieces back together?
I think I really struggled with that for a long time. Like it wasn't a clear path for sure. Like what I was absolutely sure of at that point was one, I didn't belong in college. Like I wasn't emotionally ready, socially ready. I didn't thrive in institutions. Like I knew that just this wasn't going to be the box that I could like live in.
Mm-hmm.
And I also knew that like that was sort of the expectation. And so again, this like constant duality of like who we're supposed to be as adoptees and just as people in general, and who I felt like and thought or was trying to figure out was on the inside didn't match up. So for me, it was a really wandering path. The decision to leave college took years. Like I tried going back again and again and again, and I continued to fail. And again, I would just internalize that as like, there's something wrong with me. I'm a terrible person. And, knowing also that like, I was always a good student. It wasn't an issue with school, but it was a barrier that it wasn't working. And to admit that wasn't working and to really like say, Mindy, it's time for you to step off this path. It took a long time, and it took I had to build up like a bravery muscle in order to do it, because it wasn't what people expected. And it wasn't, there was no like answer of like, okay, if you're not going to do this, then here's your path, right? There's no other, clear set of ways that we do things. It's, you go to college, you get married, you have children, you get a job, and that's the order of operations. And so to like really bump up against that in the beginning and be like, I am now on my own path was terrifying. But I think in some ways it also like put me in this mindset of like, all right, like it's up to me. Like I've got to figure this out. And I've got to like also like figure out how to deal with my own mental health, which that was in and of itself super complicated, because every intersection within the therapeutic and clinical setting was with white people. And I really, looking back now, had I had a therapist of color or even a therapist who was white, who understood structural racism and just racism in general, and if they had said to me, Mindy, part of why you're struggling in your life is because you're, an Asian person growing up in a white world, that would have turned on the light bulb for me in so many different ways, and would have explained so many confrontations, interactions, terrible experiences in a way that I could have like started putting the pieces together. But I didn't even have, that until, again, much, much, much later, like without resources, without, different people in my life to navigate. So it was just a matter of trying different things and like working different jobs and experiencing different life experiences, and like knowing what I didn't like and how the things that didn't fit in with me. That was really more how I put the pieces together. It was like, all right, this is not for me. Okay, this is not for me.
Right.
Okay,
But
this is
addition
not
by
for me.
subtraction. Like
Exactly.
you're just kind of,
Exactly.
And I do just want to really quickly say that hearing you go to your college situation, literally that felt like ripped out of like my lived experience, because
Wow.
I
How
did the
dare
same
you
thing.
steal his life experience like that?
I went to college and it just never felt right. And I left and I kept going back. I went back like multiple times and just failed each time. And again, a new piece of language. You said you had to build up a bravery muscle. And I love that, because I think I am right now building that muscle up to finally tell myself that, hey, it's okay if you don't do this. Because I've even been saying more frequently recently, I'm really upset that I didn't graduate from college. And like, I'm thinking about going back and doing all these things. And like, I just wanted to say that hearing you say that and talk about building that muscle up and obviously taking the time just really clicked with me. That might have been a light bulb for me. So thank you.
Oh, and I appreciate you like mirroring that back to me, because I think that was such a lonely experience. Like I really felt so isolated in having to make that decision. And I'm sure there are plenty of people who go to college and end up not staying in college. But I think, intersectionally with everything that I was going through as a, transracial adoptee, and having not been given the tools to like figure out that was a huge part of what was going on for me. Like it really validates, my own experience to hear that you went through that as well. So I really appreciate that.
Well, and
Absolutely.
I think too, it's like, it's such a, for lack of a better term, I'm sure it's out there, but it's just such like a upper middle class white point of view and pathway pathway to highway, really, and it's only now in the past couple of years, 3 or 4 maybe, that I've started hearing like, do you really need to go to college? Because all of these students are coming out with huge amounts of debt that they're not paying off until they're 40, 50, and like and trying to build their lives and do these things. And so like for me, like my niece who is 19, she hasn't gone to college, and like she's like taking some time to figure it out, because she has recognized that like that's not for her and that's not necessarily her path, and so like there's other things like just being 19-year-old like that she has to get through, but like, and to be aware of the time in which you were going through that path, where like the option, quote unquote, certainly the stigma around not going to college would have been greater. So like the option to like, well, I could just go to a trade school and apply myself there and make similar amounts of monies without the college debt, or I could go to, like all those things. Obviously college debt was a little bit different too, but like, just like, and even hearing you talk about discovering who you are by trying a bunch of things and not figuring that out, and the presence of mind to be like, you know what, that's not for me, I think is really wonderful. And I'm curious, and actually, I'd love for you to dig into this. And it's something that we don't typically do on the show, but like, what was that particular process like? Because I think when you're an adoptee and you're realizing you're coming up against this, like, I don't have a cute name for it. Like for Asians, there's like the bamboo ceiling, but women, there's a glass ceiling. But like whatever the adoptee ceiling is, whatever this fluffy cloud fog of adoption that we just keep bumping up against that we don't know is there, like like it could just feel so frustrating. But what was that process for you, trying all these things and getting to the point of realization where you're like, no, this actually isn't for me, I'm going to try something else?
For me, it was so intertwined with my mental health journey. Like it was always a constant push and pull of like being like highly functional, but depressed, and like out in the world, like doing my thing. Or just like really depressed, which those aren't two.
I feel that so hard. Yeah.
Those aren't too good. Those aren't two modes to operate in well at all. And I feel like I still struggle with that today. And, I just had turned 50. And so it's like, which is why I really believe that like our adoption stories are really like our whole life story. But for me, it was a constant play of like trying to figure out how to manage my mental health, which again, I had no language or understanding or context of like how to talk about adoptee things until I was in my early 30s and I read Journey of the Adopted Self. It was the first time I had ever picked up a book about adoption, and even really like thought more critically about my adoption. Like I think in the back of my mind, I had always thought that like it had something to do with my adoption, but I always framed it as like, oh, here I am, the one who's like the not well-adjusted adoptee or whatever those other clinical labels that were given, right? Where they put the onus on the adoptee to be well-adjusted or whatever. And on the back of that book, there were references and resources. And one of the resources was a clinical sort of a suite of therapists that were very local to me. And I was like, oh, I wonder what would happen if I went to see a therapist who actually understood adoptees.
I still feel like those are unicorns. I don't
total unicorns. Yeah. And I was like, in the timing, I was just really lucky that I was sort of like open to that possibility at that point. Because, had it been maybe 5 years earlier, I probably wouldn't have been. I would have probably still been in that sort of mindset of like, oh, this doesn't really have to do with my adoption. This is just like me, like not being able to figure out my life.
Right.
But at that point, I was like, I was a little more open to the idea of like exploring that as a possibility. Because, the narrative you're always told growing up is that, this is wonderful. This is like our family story. It's like, it's real, true family mythology and like how my parents had always told it, it's that whole like savior story of like, you were in that in an orphanage that burned down and we saved you. And, in a way that wasn't meant to be harmful, but that is like really harmful.
Mm-hmm.
So it was really that point forward where I started like doing that whole like 2 steps forward, 3 steps back dance of like trying to dig into my whole adoption history and, thinking about doing birth search and all of that, all sort of like intertwined with me trying to figure out who I am as a human being, which, my art and creativity really was sort of the thing that saved me, because not only was I not on a straight and narrow path of like, here I'm in college and I'm going to go to this job. Now I'm just like really trying to figure out, what are my interests? What are my strengths? What do I like to do? And for me, I move through the world as a creative person. That's how I experience myself in the world. That's how I express myself in the world and connect with others. So that was really the thing, the vehicle that sort of was, in addition to sort of like a really strong sense of social justice from the beginning, even though, I would never have identified myself as an activist way back when, but I think as transracial adoptees, we might have like an extra eye towards like seeing the gaps. And I definitely always like felt those gaps of where like people weren't included or systems weren't fair or things like that, and always kind of had a little bit of like a righteous edge around those types of things where I could like lean into. But there was no quick and easy solution. It was so much fumbling. It was so much trying different things. It was so much like being a chameleon in the world and like trying on different people and personas. And I think as adoptees, we often are really good at that. Like we can blend really well in a lot of different spaces. And I found that was true for me, and which I think makes it even harder to really identify like, who am I?
Right.
But it was a very slow process of unpacking that I think probably in earnest, I didn't really get to the meat of really doing that until probably like my mid 30s into my 40s.
Yeah, I definitely resonate with that statement of being a chameleon, because I think for my college career too, I always just did want to fit in, and I always wanted to be part of the group that I was associated with. And at the time, for me, was the fraternity, and so I was just doing the same thing that fraternity guys.
I thought you were going to
do.
say your ping pong squad.
Yeah, the ping pong squad. Well, no, that would actually have been more on the Asian side, right? I was actually leaning into it at that point. But yeah, no, I mean, in the fraternity, it was, I was the only Asian in my fraternity, and until the very end when they got one more, right as I was leaving. It was like the token Asian in the fraternity, which is funny because I just saw a picture of their current class this year in spring of 2022, and they had 3 or 4 at least minorities in the group out of 40. And I was like, okay, good. Now we're up to 10%. But that's
in 30 years, up 10%. Great.
Hey, not 30 years. I'm not that old.
Oh, right. I forgot.
It's okay. Patrick doesn't know how to math.
Yeah, he doesn't math.
Not a math guy.
It's okay. But no, I did. I always wanted to just fit in with whatever current thing. And that was hard for me to then come out of what I really was, or what I wanted to be, or what I should be. I think because I was always trying to fit those other narratives and not my own. So, it's at what point, I guess you were saying that you started to come out. How did that transition in your 30s?
So
after the book, or were there?
Well,
did the book open more doors?
I think the book opened more doors. Like I definitely had begun percolating on the whole idea that maybe my adoption does have something to do with this. Surprise, surprise. But it definitely was not in the forefront. I mean, it was certainly something that I pushed back on, subconsciously for a very long time. But after my first son was born, it was sort of right around the same time that blogging was becoming popular and like the internet was blowing up. And I had luckily just the timing wise met like some really incredible folks online and was blogging as a creative person and as a mom, like just trying to find community. And I think, Nathan, as you talk about like, you know, existing in boxes and trying to figure out who you are or like blending in, like that for me was sort of like the first time of like trying to push the envelope a little bit in terms of like trying to define myself outside of any boxes. And I had no practice of that other than like, again, like leaving this path of like going to college and doing the path of that everybody does. But for the most part, I was still very much in that like must conform, must assimilate, like must be like everybody else type mindset that I think we all have to some degree. But I think, you know, transracial adoptees especially. And it really helped me like have a voice and explore my own desires, wants, needs, interests in a way that I had never done before and like share in a way that just felt so vulnerable, even though it was like a tiny little blog that probably had like 10 readers and we like just read each other's blogs and liked each other's blogs. But it was like so revolutionary that like I could connect with these other people who had like these similar creative interests and that, you know, we could delve together in together and like talk about making things. But what really was happening is we were figuring out who we were together as a community. And I did that for many, many years in such a way that it eventually evolved into work for me. That what became my path. Like I became an artist, a creative, and an entrepreneur, and eventually an activist because of, you know, those early blogging days and the communities that I met, and then learning to build a community and learning to break boxes. And I did it, I think, in a lot of ways, just publicly on my blog and on my platforms, just deconstructing these different aspects of my identity, first as a creative person and as a mother, and sometimes weaving in some of my adoption story, but not often. And then, you know, really bumping up against, you know, my identity as a queer person and as someone who also like exists at a lot of intersections in terms of being in a non-normative family and, you know, a lot of different things. And so I think little by little, it was this practice of, you know, learning how to exist outside of what people expect you to be in these normative boxes. And then, you know, really claiming identities on my own terms, like identities as artist or as activist or as, you know, queer or as, you know, and then eventually I think the hardest was and has been, and like where I've come to is like really just understanding my Korean, American, Asian identity, which, you know, I really understand now as, you know, how that's so confronting, because to really step into fully into an Asian American or in our Korean identities is to really other ourselves from every other person in our lives. And that is terrifying. And it's been really tricky. It's been tricky to navigate. But I think having all this practice of like really speaking to, writing about, building community around, creating work about, and processing with others, all these other different intersectional identities of mine has given me the ability to like learn, articulate, understand, and really like have the capacity now to really just integrate all those parts, including my Asian and Korean identity.
That is amazing.
Yeah, I love that. I have a question to follow up, but also, Nathan, are you still there?
I'm here, but my video.
Right, you just
gone.
red screen.
Yeah, I don't know what's going on.
Yeah, we just need your audio. You're good. You're good.
He's running an old computer.
Hilarious.
Oh my God.
It's working really hard right now. I can hear the fan blowing, and I was hoping it wasn't being picked up on the microphone.
I don't hear the fan, but yeah.
I really loved hearing you talk about that finding the blog and finding community within the blog space. Mm-hmm. I was wondering, was there a moment that you remember that it just clicked for you? Like, these are my people, or this is what I'm supposed to be doing. Like we talk about, KJ talks a lot about like finding our people. I feel like that's a language you use a lot. And I feel like that's what we've been, for me, it's what we've been doing in like the Instagram space that you see, like the social media space. But for you to be in that space in the early internet days of blogging, I was wondering if there was that, if you had that moment, or if it was just really that whole period of being in community, like you said, with those 10 or so people, that was just like, yep, this is my group, and this is what I'm supposed to be doing.
Yes, absolutely. 100%. Like it was the first, I think, experience of belonging that I had that I probably ever was created for myself, rather than like having to step into someone else's space and feel like, do I belong? Like it was really, for me, an experience of like creating my own belonging. And I feel like since then, I've been on this really long and really complex trajectory of really understanding what belonging is. And what I thought probably back then of what belonging was is probably really completely different to how I'm thinking about belonging now. And it's really interesting because I think belonging in the culture that we live in right now is really divisive. Like it really silos us into these different subcultures, which I think can be pretty problematic. But that's not to say that I don't believe that, the experience of like affinity and sharing space with people who have your same lived experience isn't super important. I think it really is, especially to those people looking for healing and any kind of resolution in their story. But I think, there is a danger of really like being cordoned off and really over-identifying into these specific facets of ourselves, where it feels we have the expectation that, like we're all Korean adoptees, we should all get along. And because we're, we share this identity, but no, it's never going to be like that because we're so widely different in every other way. So it's like, just because you have this one area of shared belonging doesn't mean that you necessarily belong. And I think it's a false ideology. I really believe that the way we understand belonging in this current Western late capitalism culture, where like belonging is something that people sell, they use it as leverage to create space, to create spaces that you have to pay to get into and things like that. Whereas like I've really thought about belonging like the way Koreans think about belonging, like jong, and how like that's just like essential. That just is. That's not something that you need to strive for or buy your way into or get initiated to. It just is. And that really, like for me, like had me think about like, wow, like that's the kind of belonging, like as human beings, like we should all be working towards, not just about sharing identities. But, I do think it is important to acknowledge our different identities for sure.
Yeah, it's kind of the paradox of group identity and personal identity, right? That group identities can feel so important, but group identities, like they have this thing, like there's like they're naturally gatekeepery, and so like you have to have gatekeepers, and so you either have to conform into the box of the group identity or they kick you out. And that just is how it is. And yet like you're like, okay, well, but I want to bring my personally now, KJ, in 2022, I want to be able to bring 100% of myself into whatever box I find.
Yes.
And like just be okay with that, and be okay with how many other boxes I'm bringing into those spaces. Where early days KJ was like, oh, well, this is my box and it only matches about 67% of who I am, but I'm going to go ahead and make that 100% of who I am, and so it does, like, it creates that thing. And I loved listening to you, like with the blogging and things, but I heard you say, I spent a lot of time trying to find my box, and then eventually forgot all of that, and just it was like, you know what, I'm gonna make my own box. I'm gonna break some boxes even. And I think it requires that necessity. It's something that I think about often with music, specifically between Mozart and Beethoven. Like Mozart had a particular framework in the classical style, and he was just like a genius at it. Like he was a master at operating in the style. And Beethoven, and then later on Debussy, they were like, but do we even need those things? And for me, I have never been a box breaker. And even in trying to find my own voice as a creative and figure things out, like I'm creating things that are for me, and I sometimes I give them away and be like, maybe this will help somebody else. But I'm curious what the process has been for you as a creative. What is your particular creative means of choice at the moment? And then B, what's that process been like of finding boxes, fitting into boxes, breaking boxes in terms of shaping your identity now?
Wow. Okay.
Simple question. It's fine.
So as a creative, like I think of myself, of my medium as really multimodal, like as a quote unquote artist, and I'm not like a trained artist or obviously someone who went to school for art. Um, I am someone who uses art as a means of expression. It's a process, it's a modality for me, and it's a connection. For me, creativity is all about connection. So whatever I build with my creativity, even though it looks like I'm either making collages or a mixed media painting or I'm, hosting a class around those things, really what my aiming to do is not to teach how to make things. It is really to build and create connection. And so that's what I've always used my creativity for. And in that space, it really intersects with sort of like the wellness space, which is I found myself in a lot along my creative journey, which has been, both beneficial and also really complicated to navigate. There's a lot of, tricky things in the quote unquote wellness community. But we won't go down that rabbit hole. So I've always really, for myself, creativity and making things has always been a way for me to think through and process my own thoughts, feelings, experiences, and then sharing that in space with others has been a way for me to connect with them. And I think that also, as to the second part of your question, KJ, is that it really also in community has helped me expand on my own awareness and understanding, because I think it's really true that you can't really heal in a vacuum. So you have to heal in relationship. And so with my creative process and all the projects that I work on, I'm really building relationship, and I'm just learning. I'm learning from other humans. I'm learning from interactions and experiences. And, just using my creativity either as a container for that or as a way to, share and collaborate and create expression around that.
That's really awesome.
I love that you talk about, I love that your creativity is an extension of you. It is who you are. And then that feeds into the connections that you want to create, which leads to healing, which is all plays into healing. And it all is part of one fluid, amorphous situation that we have going on that I really, really enjoy. And I feel like I'm doing healing just hearing and being able to sit in on this conversation. And so, like for adoptees specifically, healing in community, I think, is very important. And I think there are a bunch of different things that go into healing, and how all of these things come together. And I think part of that is, if possible, finding your way back to your country of origin, which for us is Korea. One, it's just a powerful connection. Not everybody gets to go, but people who do get to go, it established that link, or at least, if not establishes, it reestablishes it from the severed piece or the severed cord tie that happened upon our adoptions. So I was hoping that you could share a little bit about your first trip back to Korea, because you shared about it in your guest forum, and I feel like it seemed really incredible story. So I was just hoping you share a little bit about that and how that played a part in your healing, or what part it played in that healing.
Yeah. So the timeline for that was really around that same time where I had just found the whole blogosphere, and it was blowing my mind that just there was this virtual community out there, right? It's like, oh my god, this thing, this www thing, it's just amazing.
Bob, get off the phone.
Wait, were you on MySpace too?
I missed MySpace, so but yeah, so I was just fresh into that, and I had just been a new mom. So my son was just under a year. And we had a friend who was teaching teaching American in Korea as, as a teacher for doing like one of those like 2-year, 3-year programs. He was Canadian and he was there for a couple of years. So he said, you should come. You should totally come. He's like, I've been here for like a year. I can speak a little bit of the language. I can read, like I can get you around. Like you should totally come. And of course, I'm thinking like, I can't go to Korea. I just had a baby. Like,
what about my child?
But everybody's like, no, you should totally go. You don't know if you're going to get this chance again. And we, at the time, luckily we were like in between houses, my husband and I. And so we were living with my parents, which, was a blessing in many, many ways. And this was one of them. So they were just like, we'll take care of Owen and you go do your thing. And
wow.
Which meant I had to go alone, which was, probably the best way for me to go for the first time. And it was like so quickly decided upon, like it really was not something that I like had planned and like really thought about. And it was just like, I'm here, I got invited. I'm like, okay, I'll go, I'll buy a ticket. It was just like, it happened really fast. So I think that was actually really helpful as well. But from the point where I was on my adoptee journey, like I just had no sense of like wanting to do a birth search or wanting to learn about Korean culture, or even like, I just didn't know anything. So I'm like, I'm a total tourist. I'm like, I'm super psyched to go to Korea, go hang out with Jeff and eat Korean food and like see the lay of the land. And I do remember thinking like, I want to know if when I land in Korea, if it smells familiar. Like that was like my big thing. Like, I know I probably won't remember anything because I was only 10 months when I was adopted, but like, I wonder if like the smell or something will jog my memory, and it didn't. But like, that was sort of
pollution
like
smells different.
That was sort of like my one thing I was like, maybe thinking a little bit about, but other than that, I was just really just open to the experience of experiencing Korea. And in that, I was only there for like 10 days, which it's long enough, but not very long to fly all that way. And a lot of the time I was kind of on my own because my friend Jeff was teaching during the day. So I had to kind of like navigate things a little bit, although he would like draw me maps and give me directions as best he could. And I did pretty well. And luckily, I had some pretty positive experiences, like interacting with Korean people. I had my hair cut while I was in Korea for the first time by like another Asian lady, which was like really great. And, just wandered around the Korean countryside and like took in the sights and the sounds and the smells. And of course, like it did, touch upon the nostalgia and the idea of like, wow, this like could have been my life, and just imagining that like ghost world, which that's new language for me too. That ghost world of like, I wonder, like I could be walking down the street and passing, a relative. So I was more in the space of like wonder. I think that was the safest space for me to inhabit at that time. I think it was too scary and volatile to really, think about going further. But what I did know is that at the end of my trip, I wanted to stop at an orphanage and leave a donation. And I thought that'll be like the thing that will make this trip meaningful for me as a Korean adoptee. And I'll do it like on my way out. So if I have some feelings about all of it, I'll be able to like process that at home. And so I did that. So we, on the last 2 days of my trip there, we hung out in Daegu, and internet cafes were like the big thing. I don't know if they're still big there now, but that's where you went to go use a computer. So I just like hopped into this internet cafe, like pulled up like the yellow pages online and did this like eeny meeny. There's like 5 orphanages nearby. I'll pick one and I'll go. And so I did that. I picked an orphanage. It was called the White Lily Orphanage. My friend Jeff and I jumped in a cab and we went there. And of course, nobody spoke very good English. And the Korean nuns who were running the facility were just super kind. And I'm sure like I wasn't the first Korean American adoptee to show up on their doorstep. They seem like they've been through this drill before, but just very, very, very kind, and just like showed me around and told me as much as they could a little bit about the history of that orphanage, and that It was an orphanage, but now it was like a children's home or a children's, like a daycare maybe facility or something. So they weren't housing orphans any longer. And we use that term orphan very loosely, right?
Mm-hmm. Right.
And I like pulled out from my wallet as much Korean cash as I had left, on my last day, and said, I just wanted to leave this with you. And, just thank you for everything you've done for the, Korean adoptees. And they took my Korean name and my information. I figured they were going to write me a thank you note or something. And so I get home back to Boston, and about 4 or 5 months later, I get this package from Korea. I'm like, what the heck is this? And I open it, and it's from the orphanage. And it was from the nuns who I had visited with that day, had gone into their records to see who I was, if I had been there. And I was. It was the orphanage that I had stayed at. And they had pulled my records and sent them to me.
Wow.
That is so wild.
It's so wild.
Literally eeny, meeny, miny, mo.
Yeah.
Oh, I was here X amount of years ago.
Yep.
Wild.
And I mean, part of me now thinks I must have subconsciously sort of known or heard that name before or whatever. But it just felt like I was like, oh my God, that was so crazy. Mm-hmm. And here I was now with this file, and I didn't open it for 10 years. I opened it and looked through it really quickly when I got it, but I didn't deal with it. I really didn't deal with it for many, 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 many years later. It was really, really so intense, and just I wasn't ready in my early 30s. It took me till much later to start thinking about going down that path.
Was most of it in Korean?
Oh yeah, that most of it, except for maybe little bits and pieces. And I think, and I had also no understanding of the Korean documentation and how they had created a lot of those forms. And so I had no idea what I was looking at. And of course I didn't know anybody Korean who would even maybe potentially be able to translate these or how to find someone. So I just put them safely in a box to TVDs another day.
Yeah, this is my eventually.
This is for future Mindy. Future Mindy will handle this.
Yeah,
I think I have some too that I've never translated actually. So
yeah. So I have since then, in the past couple of years, have begun delving into that package and going on that search, and it's been really interesting. I think one thing that I did have in my history was that the place that I was relinquished was well documented. And so I was able to connect. It wasn't the orphanage that I was at. Actually, the orphanage I was at ended up being a second location, which I didn't know. But I was dropped off at this one orphanage and they were full. And so they had taken me to the police station. And the girl who actually was tasked with taking me to the police station, I was given her name. So that's how I got assigned my Korean name, which is interesting. And the police station brought me to the White Lily Orphanage in Daegu, which is where I ended up on my visit. So I didn't even know about the first place or the second place that I was in multiple orphanages, and then later learned that I was also in foster care. But I was able to speak to they had records still, the very first place I was dropped off, of the day that I was relinquished, which was really, really fascinating. But not a very strong paper trail. So fortunately, not a lot to go on.
Well, that just is a wild story to hear all of that and to think that was the place that you had been and make that connection. I did have one question I wanted to ask about just kind of some of your current work and your activism that you've been doing. I think one of the ways I actually found you, of course, was during Adoption Month last November during NAM. And I remember, your little post of all the prompts of each day and using that. And I really appreciated that. So number one, I want to say thank you for that. That was amazing. Oh, KJ just made the connection that was yours.
It's like,
oh yeah, yeah, duh. Yeah, you really helped Nathan come out of his shell when it comes to sharing a story.
Really?
Yeah. No, that was the most I've ever posted continuously on social media about my adoption. So thank you for that. But what I guess started that? What prompted you to create that list and your own activism through Instagram and other things that you've been doing?
So interestingly enough, like that sort of like prompt type post is something that's pretty common in the creative world, like in a lot of different mediums. Like you'll see like monthly like photography prompts or
300 things to write about, or
like so like
it's
a pretty I think well used kind of way to sort of spark engagement. And for me, like it was only the second time I had known about NAM. The first time was, you say NAM or NAM?
We say whatever. Dealer's choice. I think it's
Nathan
dealer's
always
choice.
says
I think we've gone back and forth, honestly.
But I think because it's Nathan, I'm just like, yeah, Vietnam.
Oh yeah, you always say that. You do always make that.
Back when I was in Nam.
I wanted a way for myself to like to be able to have a conversation. Like it's such personal and complex storytelling or information sharing that I just needed a framework, like to be able to drop into being a part of NAM in any way. Like for myself, like I just needed some kind of guidepost, and I knew I probably wouldn't write every day. Even though they were my own prompts, I just wanted to offer that as a framework if somebody else, if it inspired them in some way too. And I'm glad it did. And I know I've heard from other people too, that it was like, it wasn't so great for them. Like it made them feel like it put a lot of pressure on some people, like feeling like they should be sharing. And I hope that, and this is true, like for any kind of thing that I think we share on social media, like there's never a metric of like success or like you have to do it one way. That was just really my way of engaging. And if it inspired or helped other people engage as well, like I'm really happy about that.
Yeah, I think everyone takes it differently. Some people might take prompts as a pressure to do it. Others will take it as maybe a needed pressure to do it, like I did. So I like direction, and I like organization. And I like
Nathan is like, just tell me what to do.
Tell me what to do and I'll do it.
Just tell me what to
do. Yeah, me too. So, very much so. Like I definitely, the idea of just like kind of trying to be like, how do I navigate this month? It's like so many thoughts, emotions, like things coming at you, on the interwebs. I just wanted a nice, tidy way to be able to like say what I want to say, what I have the bandwidth and the capacity to say, and then just be like, peace out from there. Yeah. But it was really wonderful because I connected with so many adoptees that I hadn't connected with before, and not just Korean adoptees. So like, I think it was mostly positive, and I hope that maybe I'll try to do something like that again this year.
Yeah.
Well, I think something that's really incredible is just knowing that you came in at the blog space and now you've transitioned to this point of seeing adoptees like come from the fringes at that point, and now coming out of the woodwork to really share. I think we're part of that. We're part of that group.
Absolutely.
And I think it's absolutely incredible. And we're going to get ready to transition over to food, to our snack here. And I only am saying this because it has been an absolute honor to hear just even this part of your story. And I feel like even from your guest forum specifically, there's so much more that I would really love to dig into at some point. And I want to just right now invite you back onto the show for a part 2 here in the near future, because there's so much more that I want to talk about. I feel like I'm on a similar path that you were on, and I feel like I want to learn a lot from you. And I feel like there's a lot that not only are you teaching me, but you're teaching our audience. Especially not just the adoptees who listen to the show, but our allies, our families, our friends, people like that in our communities that are hearing this. I think it's really important that they hear all of the work that you've been doing as well and hear that full story, just as we want to share everyone's full story. But I just want to hop on and say that really quickly. And yeah, we definitely have to have you back. So thank you so much for sharing so vulnerably until we get to this point, and we will definitely be back for part 2. But right now,
be continued.
We're gonna have to.
Yes, that sounds fun. And call me anytime, Patrick. We can commit.
Yes, we absolutely are gonna have to do that.
It's very reasonable rate. It's like $2.50 an hour. So.
That sounds creepy.
Or Mindy's rate.
No, it's for this coaching. It's great.
Oh,
yeah, that's right. Yeah. I'm paying you the $2.50.
Patrick was like,
for the phone call.
No, for the coaching session.
No, for you to be a guest, you didn't know that you had to pay us $2.50 to be a guest
on the show. Yeah,
I missed that part.
Yeah, all right. Well, anyways, yeah. So we are gonna take a quick break, and then we'll be right back with some food with Mindy Tsonas Choi. Roll it.
Welcome back to the Janchi Show eating portion with Patrick laughing like always. I don't know. And putting
couldn't even hear me laughing that time.
Putting his sunglasses on inside.
The sun is bright in my eyes.
He is getting ready to be cool while he eats his snack. I don't know.
What are you saying? I'm not cool all the time?
Yes. No comment.
Ouchie.
Got him.
Because I say words like ouchie.
Thank you so much for the great interview. As we said, we can't wait to have you back and maybe have another snack. But for today, we have a very interesting rice roll snack that I'm a little curious how you guys will think of it, because the one you have is banana flavor. The one I have is a plain flavor. Does it say the brand on the front?
Yes, the brand. Yeah, Nonghyop. Hyop.
Okay.
I've
seen these many times before at the H Mart, and they're usually in huge containers or packages where there's like 30 of them, or sometimes like 20. So the ones that you have like what, 10 or something in it?
Yeah, maybe 8.
Yeah,
okay.
like 8.
Something like that.
But I had never seen banana flavor
grams.
before, so I thought that was an interesting, unique twist on it. So you guys will have to.
It literally looks like.
And
it
it's
looks
not
like
a corn
on the cob, but it actually looks like Corn Pops, the cereal.
But it's like a
cereal
bird
bar
feeder snack thing.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
And
We're
that's
supposed
the
to
thing.
eat it like birds.
The first thing I thought of when I saw it at the store was like bird feeder. Is this real food? Is this what I'm supposed to eat? But then I mean, look at like rice cakes.
Food?
Rice cakes are just flat discs that look like hockey pucks.
That's true.
Oh man, this smells like a laughing.
Oh, that's a lot of banana.
Is it?
Yeah.
Doesn't taste like banana, but it smells like banana.
It smells intense. Also, I just wanted to read this ingredient statement. It says, so it's 100% Korean rice, which I have a comment on that as well. But it says, we use only rice and natural sweeteners, nothing else ever. That's our statement, and we're sticking with it.
That's our statement, and we're sticking to it.
How do you get a banana flavor if you don't ever use any other ingredient though? That's
incredible. Well, the sweetness is the banana flavor, and so it's natural banana sweetness, I would assume.
Yeah. Okay.
It definitely tastes like a cylinder rice cake.
Yeah, but it doesn't even taste like banana. It just smells like banana.
I mean,
I
can taste the
really
corn,
smell like banana,
but it smells like banana.
Like I usually don't like banana tasting things, but this is pretty good.
Yeah, I agree, because sometimes banana flavoring is too artificial.
Yeah, it's like really fake.
Yeah.
And I don't even really like bananas. I mean, I do eat them.
All right, that bite did taste like a banana.
Maybe it gets more banana as you get to the middle. It's got like a banana center.
I really like the shape,
well,
though.
I'll tell you right now, it's the exact same thing as on the outside.
Okay.
Just more corn pops stuffed together.
Pops. By the way, I only have 2 of these left because I had a package of like 20 and my kids ate them all really, really quickly. So they love them.
They're great. Like I like how like the shape is really good just for like handheld snacking.
Mm-hmm.
It's very
so Nathan, you have a regular flavor or?
Yeah, mine's just normal. It doesn't have any flavoring. It has a little sweetness to it.
I kind of wish that mine was just a normal flavor.
Okay. Well, you can go to the store.
Do they come in savory flavors too?
I didn't see.
Or are they all sweet?
I didn't see a savory flavor.
Yeah,
actually,
like
most of the time I just saw regular plain no flavor. So that's why the banana one that you have is kind of stood out to me as something different. But
that's interesting.
Yeah, I've never seen anything like spicy but there might be.
Good too.
I don't know. I could check the interwebs.
I like it. It's good.
This does seem ripe for like a sundubu flavor.
Yeah.
That's weird, man.
It is
I
weird.
don't like it. I feel like I'm inhaling essence of banana.
I actually don't want another one right now. This
Like,
is
it's
not
not
normal.
bad.
It's not
But
bad snack. It's not because, I don't know what
I think
it's why.
if I were to close my eyes, it would feel like I was eating a crunchy, crusty banana, which is real gross.
It's really gross.
As a Korean rice snack, that's great. As a banana, that's awful. So
Yeah, I do
It's
wish
an
it was a
insult
different
to
flavor.
bananas. Yeah.
So
like I'm
there you go. I guess
dragon
get
breathing
regular,
banana.
not banana.
I feel like it made me short of breath now, actually.
that
I
kind
got
of
nervous.
It's a weird.
I don't
You
like
got
snacks that
nervous?
make me nervous.
Scary snacks.
Well, I will continue to buy these because
Kids like them.
my kids
They're
like
good
them.
for kids. I
and,
think
yeah.
my kids would like this.
Oh, you know what it is? It's like banana flavor with a hint of like that double bubble gum.
Oh, sure.
Ah, yeah,
I have
you're
the
right.
bubblegum aftertaste now that you say that, and
Mhm.
I'm furious. I did not want that in my mouth.
Do you not like
But now-
bubblegum?
I do, but that's not
No.
what I want in my mouth right now.
All right.
No, it's like too sweet. That's what it is.
Wow. Okay. I feel like I do feel like I need to breathe.
Right?
You need
I've
a
never had
beverage.
COVID, but I wonder if that's what this feels like. I just feel like my
Great.
Okay.
That's not a bad.
That's
My-
misinformation.
Yeah, now you're
my lungs tightened up. a
poor
little bit.
advertising there.
That's just how I feel. Maybe it means I'm just horribly out of shape. I don't know.
You're eating a rice cake. I mean, this should be kind of healthy for you, honestly, compared to some of the
No, the
snacks
rice
we've
is
had.
great. It's the banana.
Oh,
Yeah, the banana
the
part.
artificial
The essence
banana
of
is what's killing you.
banana. Yeah.
It's a good shape for like it needs a dip or something.
Not
Dip
it's,
it in yogurt or
Oh, yeah. I
Whipped
was thinking
cream.
dip. A dip,
Mm.
for sure.
it's
like
definitely a
chocolate
dipping
sauce. I know
vehicle.
Patrick would like the chocolate hot fudge. Just dip this in there.
Not with
Oh
this.
yeah.
If it was chocolate flavored, for sure.
You don't
That'd
get
be
down
great.
with chocolate banana?
Chocolate rice cakes are great, by the way.
Not this banana.
I
Maybe
would
like
be
an
like-
actual
it would-
banana.
It would be like a banana split, but without
Oh
the-
yeah. There you go.
Oh, yeah.
maybe
I
if you
forgot.
crush
I've
this
not
up
thought
on
about a
some
banana
ice
split
cream
in
with
years.
chocolate.
Yeah.
I could
now we're
get down
talking.
with that.
Why don't we just crush this up and put some milk on it and call it Rice Krispies cereal?
That's true.
Okay, let's get into ratings. Mindy, why don't you kick us off? How many bananas out of 5 do you give this Korean rice snack?
Like as an idea of a snack and I really want to like it. Like it feels good to me, happy, friendly, but like the taste, the banana
It's a
taste
friendly
is
snack.
just-
It does. It looks friendly. It
It
looks
does.
like, hey,
Really
come over
inviting.
here, eat me.
it wants me to like it, but I'm not in love with it. I'm gonna give it a 2.
Oh, okay.
Okay. Nathan, what about your non-banana flavored Korean rice snack? Which I didn't even read the Korean. The Korean on this, well, it's called Crunchy Rice Rollers by Nonghyop,
Rollers.
and it's Sargangjong. I don't know if that's like Nonghyop's brand or if that's just Korean rice snack or crunchy rice roller, but Sargangjong is what it's called. How is your unflavored Sargangjong?
Unflavored is, like I said, like a rice cake. I'd eat it again. 4 out of 5. My kids would give it a 5 out of 5, I think.
All right.
So yeah, I would eat it again. I like it. It actually wasn't as messy as I expected it to be as well. It kind of held together fairly
It is,
firm.
yeah, that's
Yeah,
definitely
it
good.
is solid. Solid snack.
So I have to give it a
In
little
that
bit higher rating for
regard.
that. So yeah.
Understandable. I'm giving it a 2 as well. I feel like the banana is just overpowering in the wrong ways.
Mhm.
And yeah, I think I want to try another flavor. And the rice part is good. The rice
part
is the
good.
rice part is what gives it the 2 stars or the 2 bananas. We'll have to try another one. Well, I'll have to try the regular
the
one.
plain
I want
one,
to try
yep.
that, and then I want
Alright.
to try the regular dipped in chocolate.
I'll try to look to see if there's new flavors.
I stand by my previous statement where I feel like I'm eating a crunchy banana, which I don't know. Like when I finished it, I was like, "Oh, I feel like I just ate a banana," which is pretty impressive. Because also,
I do
will
feel
say-
like I did just eat a banana.
I
Like,
will say, eating a banana gives me a similar like mouth scent throat vibe thing.
Mhm.
I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
So they really nailed the natural banana flavor. I don't like this. It's too, the weight diameter of the cylinder is too large. So I feel like I have to open my jaw too far.
Yeah, well, we got to do
And-
that wide mouth. This is a
Yeah.
wide
Okay, so
mouth.
fun,
Open
not so
up.
fun, whatever. Factoid about me. There's a point at which to open my jaw fully, it unhinges a little bit like a snake.
Ooh.
Yeah.
And then pops closed
Oh,
again.
yeah, no, mine
Okay.
does that.
So yeah, it's not great. So I don't like
Don't
when
do
I have
that.
to, and this sits right at the cusp of maybe it's going to do that, maybe it's not. So it's just it's an unfortunate diameter for these cylinders to have. Overall, I think it's well made, but I can't get behind the flavor. I'm going to give this. I'm going to give it a 2. I thought about giving it a 1.5,
Yeah, I
but
thought you were
I am
giving it a
eating a
1.
second one, but so I'm going to give it a 2 because I'm eating a second one, but not great, not terrible, but not great.
We went
I'm
from.
curious though what you have to say. You said you had something to say about the Korean rice.
Oh, yeah, you did. 100%
So-
Korean rice.
Yeah. I've been thinking about this in Pachinko, the TV show. They eat
Spoilers.
Korean rice. It's like a minor thing. They eat Korean rice, and they're like, "Wow!" In Japan, and they're like, "Wow, this is so good." And now I'm like, "Can I taste the difference between rices from different places?" I cannot, but that made me think of it, and I was like, "Oh."
I'm
I
only at
wonder
the
if
part
it
in the
would-
book where you're learning that the access to rice is very not existent.
Oh yeah, it's not even. I don't know that it's.
She's
even
trying to
talked
get
about.
it for a wedding
Yeah, I don't know that it's
or a
talked about
celebration, I guess.
in the book. I think it's just a thing for the show, but yeah, I don't know. I was just so then I was like, I wonder if that's a selling point, and if that's some just kind of post-war, post-colonizing, whatever, or if that's just oh yeah, it's cool. It's 100% green rice. Support the Hanmingu. I don't know. Anyways,
Not
that's all.
imported, I guess. I did
It's
find
imported through Australia. It
Oh,
comes to
okay.
us. It goes Korea, Australia, and then California.
Ah.
I don't know why it doesn't just come straight over, but yeah.
So I found another flavor online. There's one that's being sold at Walmart actually by Bamboo.
It's
but it is
bamboo flavored?
No, the name of the
Oh.
company is Bamboo. Crunchy Rollers, whatever. But it's called Crunchy Rollers. It is mixed berry flavor, so it actually has little pieces of mixed berry
Nope.
within the rice. So
Don't sound so excited to
I don't
try
know.
that.
I'm just saying, I'll
Sound
try it.
so happy
I'm going to try it for my
that.
kids. Hey, Trust
It
me,
sounds
my
like
kids are
Captain
running out
Crunch
of
or
snacks.
something.
So
Yeah, it does. This is a Captain Crunch knockoff.
yeah,
Walmart.
I will let you guys know how that one is.
That is hilarious.
My
Yeah, we'll have
kids-
to revisit that at some
Yeah.
point.
But
That's funny.
Mindy, thank you again for a great interview today. Where can people find you online? Where you would like to be found?
So you can find me just at my main Instagram, which is my name, Mindy Tsonas Choi. You can find me at the Be Seen Project, which is one of my art and activism programs. And yeah, that's really where I'm hanging out these days.
Awesome. Hanging out with the IG crew. So
It's just
Thank
blogging 2.0 basically.
That's
Blog-
right.
yeah, it
Yeah.
is.
It really is.
It's
It
square
really is.
blogging. It's back to the squares again. Oh no, we're back to the
Square
squares.
blocking.
Fitting in squares. So-
Oh wow! I was like, "What are you talking about?" We're back
Yeah.
to the squares
He
again.
really
Sorry,
just
that's
tried
a
to
He's
that's a
looping it back
stretch.
to the interview.
I
Yeah.
know.
I
It's a
gotcha.
stretch of it. You get it. Okay.
This was
Wow.
so fun. Thank you so much for having me.
I have to at least have one bad joke per show.
I think you might be the first guest who's experienced
the
the
soundboard.
the
in real
soundboard.
I
life,
love
yeah.
it.
in real time. I like that. That's funny.
Perfect.
Well,
Are
you
you
can
not
find
gonna-
us, I guess. Yeah, sure. Janchi Show at all
We don't
places.
want it to end.
Janchi Show at Just Like Media. If you want to send us, justlikemedia.com. If you want to send us an email. Patrick has a phone number, which I never really remember.
Yeah, okay. You can send us a voicemail if you want. If you go back to our previous solo episode, you can hear us play a voicemail, our first one on the show. It was a really great conversation. Thank you so much to the caller.
More like an audio clip.
You
Well,
can,
it's a
if you
conversation
want.
from the voicemail.
Oh.
Yeah, the conversation
Yeah.
from the voicemail.
It's like we had a conversation with the audio clip.
Go back and listen to the episode. You'll know. If you do want to leave us a message, you can call us at 972-677-8867 and leave us that message. Again, you can also send us an email if you'd rather do it in the written form to janchishow@justlikemedia.com. If you want to support the show, you can go to janchishow.com/support or just go to the website. I think there's multiple ways that you can get there. If you are so inclined, we would love it if you go onto Apple or Spotify and leave us a rating and or review. Really helps exposure for the show, and we just really appreciate the support. If you want to find me, you can reach me on Instagram at PatrickInTheWorld.
I am on Instagram as nnowalk.
And you can find me at KJRoki wherever I want to be found on the internet. Mindy, thank you again so much. It was a good conversation. Can't wait to have you back.
Yeah.
Can't wait to have you back.
I'm excited to come back. You guys are so much fun.
Yeah.
Thank you.
You are so much fun.
Yeah. Thanks for bringing your whole self to the conversation. Until next week, dear listeners, Janchi, hey, yo!